Welcome to 17 News, your quick update on everything happening with the group. Today's video is a special edition as we'll be focusing on a single topic that has been widely discussed this week. Before we begin, I want to invite everyone, whether you're a fan of either group or simply an outside viewer, that if you'd like to share your opinion or correct any information presented in this video, you are more than welcome to do so in the comments, as long as it's done respectfully and with reliable sources. However, if you're not able to engage in a respectful discussion without resorting to personal attacks, bringing up family members, or making comments about appearance or anything unrelated to the artist's work, then this is not the place for that kind of behavior. With that said, let's start with some context. Fanwars have always existed, especially within K-pop communities. However, this situation didn't stay within fandom spaces. It quickly spread beyond them and went viral for reasons that at first weren't directly related to 17. This all began with the return of BTS. After being on hiatus for several years due to military service and solo activities, BTS announced their comeback after nearly 4 years. This was of course a huge moment for their fans. Right after BTS's return was announced, the group didn't just come back with new music, but also with a large-scale free event in Gwanghwamun. And while the performance itself went well, the situation surrounding the event quickly became a major topic of discussion within Korea. And this is where 17 unexpectedly became part of the conversation. Just hours after the event, 17 began trending online, not for something they had just done, but because people started comparing large-scale free events. Many brought up 17's Jamsugyo Showcase, a free 3-day event held months prior at Jamsugyo, followed by a free concert under the bridge above the iconic Han River. The event was reported to have attracted a massive crowd of over 200,000 attendees across the 3 days. The showcase gained renewed attention across Korean communities. Some people referenced it as an example of how large-scale events can be organized without disrupting daily life or relying heavily on public funds, while others were discovering it for the first time due to these comparisons. The conversation didn't stay within Korea. On platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, more people began talking about it, sharing their experiences and clips from the Jamsugyo performance. If you check the video on platforms like YouTube or Weverse, you'll notice that many of the top comments are recent, showing how people revisited the performance and started discussing it again. One of 17's largest Korean fanbase, SVT Archive, also shared data showing a massive spike in interest. Daily views for the Jamsugyo showcase increased by over 700%, and searches related to the performance surged globally across platforms like YouTube, Google, and Naver. However, shortly after sharing this information, the account's administrator revealed something concerning. For the first time, he was experiencing a large wave of hate messages. According to the admin, he began receiving a high volume of messages and emails containing aggressive language and personal attacks. He was pressured to apologize and threatened with reports against his account if he didn't. The situation escalated to the point where the admin publicly shared some of the emails, excluding the most severe ones. The topic, massive harassment of a 17 fanbase account, quickly began trending across Korean online forums. And as the conversation continued, some narratives even tried to claim that all of this was happening out of jealousy, arguing that 17 had never performed at that cultural location, which is also not accurate. For example, Hoshi has previously performed solo at Gwanghwamun, presenting his song Tiger as part of a KBS project, a track heavily inspired by Korean culture, which is precisely why it was selected for that stage. And let's not play dumb here. 17 fans also took this opportunity. As the group started gaining attention, many Karats used that momentum to share more about them, promoting their music and content while the topic was already trending. However, this only added more tension to the situation. By this point, some BTS fans were already frustrated with the comparisons being made, and seeing 17 content circulating even more during that moment only intensified those reactions. Even before the controversy and comparisons between the free events began, from the moment BTS's return was announced, there were already posts from fans talking about how they were going to destroy 17 and other K-pop groups. And that's usually when you can tell things are about to spiral, because instead of focusing on the excitement of your artist finally returning, the conversation is already centered around tearing others down. So what followed next was a full-blown mess. Over the past few years, 17 has become the #1 best-selling artist in South Korea, and with that level of success, attention and comparisons naturally follow. Unfortunately, instead of focusing solely on celebrating BTS's return, part of the online conversation shifted toward attacking 17. And it's important to clarify something here. When we talk about fans, we are not referring to an entire fandom. Every fandom has sides that are more visible online, and in this case, the more toxic side is often the one that makes the most noise and gains the most attention. Many 17 fans initially thought that once BTS returned and surpassed the sales record, which realistically was expected given how close the numbers were, the situation would calm down and 17 would no longer be the focus of these attacks. But instead, things escalated even further. The reason is that 17 doesn't just hold the record for the best-selling album in South Korea, they also hold the record for the highest first-day sales in Hanteo history with their 2023 album FML. For context, Hanteo Chart is one of the most influential systems for tracking physical album sales in K-pop. It records purchases in real time from affiliated stores worldwide, both online and offline. When the results were published at the end of the day, 17 had maintained their record. Posts about this quickly reached millions of views. And that's when things turned into another wave of backlash, with fans facing constant criticism and attacks simply because the record remained unchanged. The first claim was that Hanteo Chart was manipulating numbers, mainly because sales updates briefly froze during tracking. However, this is not unusual. The exact same thing happened during 17's release of FML. When large fandoms are making massive purchases at the same time, these platforms often experience delays or temporary freezes. Some narratives even went further, accusing HYBE of being involved, suggesting that the company somehow interfered to slow down one group's sales while boosting another's. Now, to be clear, these are speculations that circulated online, not confirmed facts. And if we look at it from a purely logical perspective, hypothetically speaking, if HYBE were to intervene to benefit one group over the other, why would it favor 17 over BTS? The next argument was that 17's album had more advantages in terms of promotion. But in reality, the opposite can also be argued. 17's pre-orders began about 3 weeks before release, with standard promotions such as social media and public advertising. Meanwhile, BTS's album had nearly 2 months of pre-orders and was promoted through major global platform collaborations like TikTok, Google Play, Netflix, and Spotify, reaching a much broader audience beyond just their fandom. So when it comes to visibility and exposure, BTS actually had a much wider promotional reach. Another claim was that 17 had more time to accumulate sales, but looking at the actual release times, 17 released their album at 6 p.m., meaning only 6 hours of sales were counted for their first-day record. BTS released theirs at 1 p.m., giving them around 11 hours of tracking time. So in terms of timing, 17 actually had less time, not more. The next argument was that 17's sales are somehow not valid, mainly because fans buy multiple copies of the album. But this is not unique to 17, it's a well-known aspect of K-pop culture. Fans often purchase multiple copies not just for the music, but for collectible purposes such as photo cards. That's exactly why companies release multiple versions of albums. For example, FML had 3 versions at launch. Meanwhile, BTS released 16 versions, following the same industry model that is often criticized when applied to other groups. There was also an image being spread online of albums discarded in public spaces, used as proof against 17. And yes, those albums are from 17, but they are not from FML. That photo was taken in Japan, where resellers had purchased albums in bulk to extract and resell the collectible photo cards at higher prices, leaving the remaining albums behind for others to take. And if the argument is that these kinds of images invalidate an artist's achievements, then that standard would have to apply across the entire industry, because even BTS's recent albums have been found discarded in the same way. Finally, some argued that 17's album sold more simply because it was cheaper, but their album was priced within the standard K-pop range, at around $30 depending on the retailer. And even if that were the case, since when does making music more accessible mean that its value is somehow lower? At the end of the day, every claim that surfaced was quickly addressed and debunked by fans providing context and evidence. But instead of stopping there, the accusations simply continued, shifting from one argument to another. As a result of all this controversy, Super by 17, the title track of FML, went viral once again during that week. It even became 17's most streamed track of the week, reaching around 28,000 new listeners per day. So in the end, all the haters really accomplished in their attempt to discredit the group was helping them gain even more attention. Whether it was people checking it out of curiosity, fans revisiting it after being reminded of it during the controversy, or even non-fans wanting to see who exactly was holding that #1 position, the result was the same. Because up until now, most of the accusations used to discredit 17 were focused on their physical album sales. So the next target became streams. For years, people have claimed that 17's album sales don't match their streaming numbers, but that narrative is also misleading. So let's look at actual data. In South Korea, one of the main platforms used to measure streaming performance is Melon, and these were the results. BTS's album Arirang recorded around 5.6 million streams on his first day, with a total of 14 tracks, placing it at number 11 in the country. Which, to be clear, is not a small number, it's still a strong achievement. But once again, 17 became the target of criticism after these results were released. Some argued that the comparison was unfair, claiming that BTS's album had more tracks while 17's had fewer, implying that fewer songs make it easier to accumulate streams. But if we follow that same logic, then how do we explain the 17's album, which contains 16 tracks, ranked number 6 on his first day? So what exactly is the argument? At this point, 17 fans were already exhausted from dealing with constant misinformation. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get more frustrating, another issue came up, this time involving major update accounts. There are several well-known accounts dedicated to reporting chart data and sales for K-pop artists across different countries. These accounts are often used as references by fans. But suddenly, some of these accounts began ignoring or even removing achievements related to 17. One example is China Music Data, a page that reports on charts from platforms like QQ Music, which is one of the main streaming services in China. And it's important to note, despite what some international fans believe, not every country relies on platforms like Spotify. Markets like China, Japan, and Korea have their own dominant platforms. This account initially posted that Arirang by BTS was the first K-pop album in history to be certified gold in China within 12 minutes. However, that claim was incorrect. 17 had already achieved that milestone in just 6 minutes. After fans pointed this out, the post was deleted and re-uploaded, this time changing the wording to this year instead of in history. But the situation didn't stop there. The same account later claimed that BTS had become the K-pop group with the most simultaneous entries on QQ Music, with 13 songs charting at the same time. Once again, this was inaccurate. That record is actually held by 17, who achieved it when all 17 tracks from their album Happy Birthday entered the charts simultaneously, and this time when fans tried to correct the information, the post was not fixed. Instead, the account reportedly began blocking users who pointed out the error. 17 fans were clearly confused, but that confusion was often misinterpreted by some BTS fans as jealousy toward BTS's achievements, which couldn't be further from the truth. The issue wasn't BTS. The issue was that, all of a sudden, major update accounts began removing or ignoring 17's achievements, and in some cases didn't even bother correcting the information after being called out. And from that point on, it became noticeable how 17 was being brought up in conversations where they didn't even need to be mentioned. Even large fanbase accounts, which are usually expected to be more responsible with information, began acting in a very immature way regarding this situation. For example, there was a post claiming that Swim by BTS becomes the biggest first-day debut streams by a boy group on YouTube Music Korea of all time, surpassing Maestro by 17. But that wasn't even accurate. That record didn't belong to 17 in the first place. It was held by another group. Yet 17 was still used in the comparison. And that's what stood out the most. Even when 17 wasn't directly involved, they were still being brought into the conversation. And it didn't just stay at general comparisons. Individual members of 17 also became direct targets during this entire situation, especially Hoshi, Woozi, Mingyu, and Wonwoo. Starting with Hoshi, a close friend of his, a well-known choreographer who is currently completing military service alongside him, posted the swim challenge by BTS on Instagram with Hoshi. What should have been a simple, harmless interaction quickly turned into another wave of hate. The same account that had previously spread misinformation about Hoshi reposted the video, claiming that he had uploaded it to a fan cafe with the caption, "Our owners are back." Which, if you take 2 seconds to think about it, doesn't even match the video. 17 hasn't used fan cafe in 6 years. They moved to Weverse after joining Hybe. The video was clearly posted on Instagram, and it didn't even have a caption, just a hashtag from the challenge. But instead of questioning it, people chose to run with it. The hate escalated to the point where Hoshi's friend had to temporarily remove the video due to the malicious comments. Then there's Woozi. He has once again been targeted for his appearance, something that unfortunately has become normalized in certain parts of online spaces. What's even worse is that people bring him up out of nowhere, even under posts that have nothing to do with 17, just to mock him. Wonwoo was also targeted in an even more disturbing way. Some individuals brought up his mother, who sadly passed away a few years ago, using her memory as part of insults, which goes beyond fan wars and into something that shouldn't even need to be explained as unacceptable. And Mingyu, as expected, old controversies were brought back, despite the fact that they have already been proven false. In many cases, the only evidence being used comes from an account with a known history of spreading misinformation about 17, an account that the members have already taken legal action against, even escalating the matter to United States courts, with legal proceedings in South Korea expected to begin soon. And most recently, another narrative started circulating. Some people began criticizing 17 for not publicly showing support for BTS's comeback, especially when other HYBE artists had done so. But when a 17 member actually participated in a challenge, he was attacked for it. So which one is it? Are they criticized for doing it, and also for not doing it? The Blue Challenge has been trending across the industry since January. Idols from 1st to 5th generation, groups, soloists, bands, everyone participated. BTS didn't take part in it, and you didn't see Karats attacking them for that. And honestly, I could keep going for hours pointing out more examples of misinformation and malicious narratives, but at some point it just stops being worth it. Because even throughout all of this, new updates kept coming out, and 17 continued holding the same positions they already had. At the end of the day, one of the main arguments that kept being brought up by some BTS fans was their performance on US charts, especially Billboard, almost as if that alone is enough to determine an artist's value. And this is where the idea of Western validation comes in. Western validation refers to the belief that success in Western markets, particularly in the United States, is somehow more important or more legitimate than success in other regions. But let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. 17 holds the best-selling album in South Korea both in first day and first week sales, one of the best-selling albums globally, the position as the second K-pop group with the most #1 albums in Korea, right after EXO, the title of the second K-pop group with the most diamond certifications in China, only behind Big Bang and Blackpink, multiple streaming records across major Asian platforms, the record as the K-pop artist with the most #1 albums in Japan. Their tours are at stadium level. They're constantly on tour, consistently selling out massive venues. Their concerts in Japan is the second most attended in K-pop history, with over 70,000 attendees per day, only behind legendary group TVXQ. So they have the sales, they have the streams, they have the attendance, and yet, because their level of exposure in the United States doesn't match, suddenly all of that becomes irrelevant? And let's be honest for a second. You can't expect both groups to have the same level of success in the United States, when one has had years of full-scale global promotion, while the other has received little to no support in that market. We're talking about the difference between major international campaigns and a couple of random posters on a street that don't even clearly communicate what they're promoting, and that will probably end up in the trash within hours. So again, why is recognition from the West treated as more valuable than success in the very regions these artists come from? Why does validation from one market outweigh the voices of millions of fans across Asia, the largest and most populated continent in the world? At the end of the day, this stopped being about music a long time ago. Because if it really were about music, about talent, performance, connection with fans, then none of these arguments would even exist. What we've seen this week isn't just competition, it's how quickly success gets dismissed when it doesn't fit a certain narrative. And most importantly, it's how some people are more focused on proving that only one artist can win, instead of accepting that multiple artists can succeed at the same time.